What I'm going to share with you today might be uncomfortable to hear, but understanding this could save you months or even years of confusion and heartache. I've spent decades studying how women communicate love and how they communicate when that love begins to fade. And there's something happening in relationships with mature women that most men our age completely misunderstand. We interpret it one way when it means something entirely different. You might be in a relationship right now where everything seems fine on the surface. She's still there. You still share meals together. You still sleep in the same bed. But something feels different and you can't quite put your finger on it. That feeling in your gut, that subtle shift you've been noticing, it's trying to tell you something important. And by the time I'm finished today, you'll understand exactly what that shift means, and more importantly, what you can do about it before it's too late. Here's what most men don't realize about how women process the end of a relationship. While we tend to make sudden decisions, women go through a much longer internal process. They don't wake up one morning and decide it's over. They arrive at that conclusion gradually, sometimes over many months. And during that entire time, they're sending signals that most of us completely miss because we're not trained to see them. There's something relationship researchers have discovered that should matter to every man in a long-term relationship. Women begin emotionally withdrawing long before they ever say the words, "We need to talk," or "This isn't working." They start creating distance while still maintaining the appearance of connection. And the reason this is so dangerous is that by the time most men notice something is seriously wrong, the woman has already made her decision. She's already gone through all her doubts, weighed all her options, and reached a conclusion. Now, I want you to think about your relationship for a moment. Think about how things were 6 months ago compared to now. Has anything shifted? And I'm not talking about obvious things like arguments or cold shoulders. I'm talking about subtle changes in how she relates to you. The small things that you've maybe noticed but dismissed as nothing important. Let me walk you through what actually happens inside a woman's mind when she begins to fall out of love. And this applies especially to mature women who have enough life experience to know what they want and what they're not willing to settle for anymore. These women don't play games. They don't create drama. They simply begin to redirect their emotional energy away from you and toward other areas of their life. And they do it so smoothly that you might not notice until the tank is completely empty. The first thing that changes is something I call investment level. When a woman is in love with you, she invests in the relationship naturally and consistently. She thinks about your comfort. She plans things that include you. She gets excited about shared experiences. She puts effort into understanding you better and making your life together more enjoyable. This isn't work for her. It flows naturally from how she feels. But when those feelings begin to change, something shifts in how much effort she's willing to put in. And here's the tricky part. She doesn't necessarily do less. She just does things differently. She might still cook dinner, but without asking what you'd enjoy. She might still make plans, but they're increasingly plans that don't involve you. She's still active and engaged with life, but you're slowly being edited out of the picture. Think about the last few weeks. Who's been initiating most of your conversations? Who's been suggesting things to do together? Who's been trying to maintain connection? If you're honest with yourself, you might realize that you've been doing most of the heavy lifting. And when you don't initiate, she seems perfectly content with silence. This is important because a woman who loves you doesn't need to be prompted to connect with you. She reaches out because she wants to. She starts conversations because you're on her mind. She makes plans because she enjoys your company. When you notice that all the relationship maintenance has fallen on your shoulders, that's your first real signal that her emotional investment is declining. Now, let me tell you about something that reveals even more. It has to do with how she spends her attention. We all have limited attention in a day, limited mental energy, limited emotional bandwidth. And we naturally direct those limited resources toward what matters most to us. You can actually see someone's priorities by watching where their attention goes. So here's a question for you. When she has free time, who does she spend it with? When something interesting happens, who does she tell first? When she's upset or worried, who does she turn to? If you're noticing that you're not high on any of those lists anymore, you're seeing evidence of shifting priorities. And it shows up in small ways throughout the day. Maybe she's on her phone quite a bit, but when you ask who she's talking to, it's always friends or family or work. She's engaged and animated in those conversations, but with you, things feel more routine, more obligatory. You get the practical updates and the surface level check-ins, but you're not getting her inner world anymore. This is one of the most telling signs that a woman has begun emotionally detaching. She stops letting you into her thoughts and feelings. And this happens because emotional intimacy requires vulnerability. It requires trust. It requires believing that the other person truly cares about what's going on inside you. When a woman starts to doubt whether you're really interested or whether the relationship has a future, she protects herself by keeping her deeper thoughts private. You might have noticed that her answers have become shorter, more general. When you ask how her day was, she says fine or okay. When you ask what she's thinking about, she says nothing or nothing important. She's not being deliberately cold. She's just stopped seeing you as her confidant, and that role is now being filled by other people in her life. Her sister knows more about what she's really feeling than you do. Her close friend hears about her hopes and fears. But you get the edited version, the safe version, the version that doesn't reveal too much. Now, there's another pattern that shows up, and it has to do with how she talks about the future. Listen carefully to this, because it's one of the most reliable indicators of where her head is really at. When a woman sees a future with you, she naturally includes you in her mental picture of what's coming. She says things like, we should plan a trip next spring, or when we retire we could, or I was thinking for our anniversary. The wording comes naturally because she's thinking of you as a unit. But when her vision of the future starts to shift, you'll notice the language changes. She talks about what she wants to do, where she might go, what she's thinking about for herself. You've become noticeably absent from her future plans. And if you bring up something months away, watch how she responds. Does she enthusiastically engage with the idea, or does she give vague responses like, we'll see, or let's not plan that far ahead yet? This matters because people who are committed to a relationship naturally think in terms of shared futures. They make plans together. They dream together. They build towards something together. When one person stops doing that, it means they're no longer certain you'll be there. They're protecting themselves from investing in a future that might not include you. Here's something else you need to understand about mature women specifically. By the time a woman reaches her 50s or 60s, she's learned some important things about herself and about relationships. She knows what makes her happy and what doesn't. She knows what she's willing to tolerate and what she's not. And she's much less likely to stay in a relationship out of fear or obligation or concern about what other people think. Younger women sometimes stay in relationships that aren't working because they're afraid of being alone or because they keep hoping things will improve. But a woman with life experience knows better. She knows that staying in an unfulfilling relationship doesn't serve anyone. So when she begins to feel that disconnection, she doesn't ignore it and hope it goes away. She pays attention to it. She thinks about it. She evaluates whether this is temporary or whether it indicates a deeper incompatibility. And this is why the signs can be so subtle. She's not angry or dramatic about it. She's thoughtful. She's processing. And while she's processing, she's often still going through the motions of the relationship because she hasn't reached a final decision yet. But make no mistake, the evaluation is happening. There's one more pattern I need to tell you about because it's perhaps the clearest signal of all. It has to do with conflict, or rather the absence of it. You might think that having fewer arguments means the relationship is improving. And sometimes that's true. But other times it means something very different. When a woman cares deeply about a relationship, she's willing to work through problems. She'll bring up issues that bother her. She'll express frustration when things aren't right. She'll push for resolution because she's invested in making things better. But when she's emotionally detaching, something interesting happens. She stops bothering to fight. Things that would have upset her before now barely get a reaction. You do something that previously would have led to a serious conversation, and she just shrugs it off. You might think you're off the hook. You might feel relieved that she's not upset. But what's actually happening is that she's decided you're not worth the emotional energy anymore. She's accepted that you're not going to change, or that the relationship isn't going to improve, so there's no point in fighting about it. This is what psychologists call withdrawal. It's one of the most serious warning signs in any relationship because it indicates that someone has given up. They're no longer trying to fix things. They're just riding it out until they figure out their next move. So let me ask you directly. When was the last time she got genuinely upset with you about something? When was the last time she pushed for a real conversation about something bothering her? If it's been weeks or months and things have been unusually peaceful, you need to consider whether that peace is actually resignation. Now, here's where most men make a critical mistake. When they finally realize something is off, their instinct is to panic. They suddenly start doing more compliments, more attention, more trying to fix things. They think if they just show her how much they care, she'll come back around. But this almost never works, and I'll tell you why. When a woman has been slowly detaching for months, she's been noticing your behavior during that entire time. She's been watching to see if you notice the distance. She's been waiting to see if you care enough to address it. And when you didn't, she took that as confirmation of what she suspected. So when you suddenly change your behavior after she's already made her decision, it doesn't look like genuine growth. It looks like panic. It looks like you're trying to manipulate her into staying. What actually works is much simpler, but also much harder. You have to be willing to have an honest conversation where you might hear things you don't want to hear. You have to create space for her to tell you the truth about how she's feeling. And you have to listen without getting defensive or trying to immediately fix everything. Most men can't do this. The moment she starts expressing doubt or dissatisfaction, they interrupt with excuses or explanations or promises to change. And all of that just confirms to her that you're not really hearing her. You're just trying to manage the situation. If you want any chance of turning things around, you have to do something counterintuitive. You have to give her permission to be completely honest, even if that honesty is painful. You have to show her that you value truth over comfort. You might say something like, "I've noticed we seem disconnected lately, and I want to understand what's really going on for you. I need you to be completely honest with me, even if you think it will hurt my feelings, because I'd rather know the truth than keep pretending everything is fine." And then you have to actually listen, not plan your response, not defend yourself. Just listen and try to understand her perspective. Because here's the truth. If she's emotionally detaching, there are real reasons for it. Maybe you've been taking her for granted. Maybe you stopped putting effort into the relationship. Maybe you've been emotionally unavailable. Maybe the connection you once had has faded and neither of you has addressed it. Whatever the reasons, you can't fix what you don't acknowledge. And she can't feel heard if you're too busy defending yourself to actually listen. Now, I want to be realistic with you about something. Sometimes, by the time you notice these signs, the relationship is already beyond saving. Sometimes a woman has moved so far past the point of emotional connection that no conversation or behavior change is going to bring her back. And as hard as this is to accept, you need to be prepared for that possibility. But even if that's the case, you're better off knowing the truth than living in uncertainty. You're better off having clarity than spending months or years in a relationship where you're the only one still invested. Because here's what I know about men our age. We don't have unlimited time. We don't have decades to waste in situations that aren't serving us. We deserve relationships where both people are genuinely committed and engaged. So if you're seeing several of these signs in your relationship right now, I want you to make a decision. Decide that you're going to find out the truth. Decide that you're going to create space for an honest conversation. Decide that whatever you discover, you're going to face it with dignity and self-respect. Because the worst thing you can do is nothing. The worst thing you can do is notice all these signs and then pretend you don't see them. That's how men end up blindsided when she finally says the words. That's how you end up shocked and devastated when she leaves. Because all the warning signs were there. You just chose not to look at them directly. Let me tell you what happens when you do face this directly. One of two things occurs. Either you have an honest conversation that reveals the relationship still has potential and you both commit to rebuilding connection, or you discover that she's already made her decision and you can begin moving forward with your life instead of staying stuck in limbo. Both of those outcomes are better than what you have right now if you're living in uncertainty and denial. Both of those outcomes give you back your power and your clarity. I've worked with hundreds of men who ignored these signs until it was too late. Men who kept telling themselves everything was fine, even as their partner was pulling further away. And the regret they feel isn't about the relationship ending. The regret is about the time they wasted not facing reality. The regret is about how they lost themselves trying to hold on to someone who was already gone. Don't be that man. If you're noticing these patterns, have the courage to address them. Your future self will thank you for it.